June of 1976, I graduated from high school and was preparing myself emotionally to leave my parents' house in Portview, Pennsylvania, and head off to boot camp for the Navy in Orlando, Florida. But I wasn't scheduled to leave until June or July of that year, which meant they still had a month and a half to go. So while my colleagues from the class of '76 were having one last summer blast before they headed off to college or to start their first real job, or like me, head off to the military, I was sunning myself in my parents' backyard each and every day for a month and a half. No, this is not a funny story. Does that sound heavily? No, it's not. I have to admit, I was looking forward to leaving the hellhole that was my parents' house in Portview, Pennsylvania, where my mother always abused me and my father always looked the other way. One of my favorite songs from those days is Pat Benatar's Hell is for Children, because I could so easily relate. So the backyard was where my mother put me, so that she knew where I was and she could look out the kitchen window, which overlooked the backyard, and see that I was still there. So I spent a month and a half basically chasing the sun around the backyard, well actually chasing the shade from the tree around the backyard, until my mother would look out that kitchen window and snidely yell at me to get back in the sun. So now, at least I had a towel to lay on while I was out there. That was better than the winters of my 15th and 16th years, where I had pajamas to sleep in, but I didn't have any blankets, except for the sheet that was on the mattress that I was supposed to be sleeping on top of. I would huddle under it. It was cold in that house. My mother had a tendency to turn off or turn down the heat in the winter nights in order to save money. Man, it was cold. That was actually the fourth level of hell. But back here in the first level of hell, the backyard, I was hot, I was bored, I was sweaty, but I had that towel. I was also hungry. Another aspect of the abuse that I took was I always had 3 meals a day, but they were always underwhelming. You look at me now, I'm a normal sized adult male. But when I graduated from high school, I was 5'5" and 105 pounds because I was underfed. Again, I had 3 meals a day, but they were always underwhelming. So I was always looking for additional food, always looking for additional food, and always looking for ways to get it. And one of the ways I figured out was my parents, I figured out where they hid their ready cash. It was in my dad's dresser in one of the drawers, and I would steal a $20 bill on a regular basis. And then I would use that $20 bill to buy additional food from the high school cafeteria. Now, basically, I would spend $1 a day. I actually budgeted $1 a day, so a $20 bill would last me a month. Yeah, $1 a day at the high school cafeteria in 1976 bought a lot of food. You don't really think about budgeting and stolen money, but that's what I had to do. Now, in the summers, they didn't really have a locker at high school to store the change from a broken $20 bill, and so I had to figure out something else. Now, my mother would kick me out of the house at the beginning of the day after I had my bowl of cereal, and she didn't care where I went. So I would go roam the hills of Portview and don't show up back at this house until it was dinner time. It's like, I didn't really have a whole lot of friends in high school, and so those that I did, I would hit up their parents for lunch every once in a while. I shoplifted from the local grocery store quite a bit. Sometimes I just went hungry. But that last summer, that wasn't an option, because my mother had been tired of the embarrassment, hers, not mine, of me getting caught shoplifting and her having to come bail me out, as it were. So the backyard was basically where she put me. And so I had to figure something else. I had to figure out something else. And that's when I discovered the keys to the kingdom. And my dad was on the board of the Portview Athletic Association, which basically ran the baseball fields that were down at the end of the street that we lived on. There was 3 or 4 different baseball fields down there, but there was also a building that was the offices for the Portview Athletic Association, but it was also the concession stand, so it covered both. Concession stand, that says food. Now, I slept that summer on a cot in the basement. I did not sleep upstairs with everybody else, I slept on a cot in the basement. And my dad had stored the key to this building. He had a key to the building because he was on the board, and he stored it in the glove compartment of his car. And we had a walkout basement that went out the back, and basically we had a garage in the back. You drive away down, and his car was parked at the bottom of the driveway. And he kept the key to that building in his glove compartment. So, again, slept on a cot in the basement, and the key to the car was right next to that cot. So, I ran an experiment. I got the key to the car, I quietly went out the back door, got the key out of the glove compartment, after unlocking the car, went up the driveway, down the street. This is 2 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody around. And so I get down to the end of the street and I get into the building, and of course there's food there. There's chips, there's candy bars, cherry Coke. I love cherry Coke in those days. So I say to myself, I filled up, I locked the building, went back home, went back to bed. Nobody was the wiser. It worked. So I did it again, and again, and again, and again. I thought I was being smart. I took all the trash that I would accumulate and I would throw it in the garbage cans outside. But the logistics never really, I never really quite got it. The fact that the inventory going out wasn't really matched with money coming in, that didn't sink in. And people noticed. They didn't know why, but people noticed. So they set a trap. And I went back again the next night, and I went in the building and ate my food, blah, blah, blah. And then I left, and I swear I saw somebody sitting on the stands. There was a baseball field, there were stands, and then there was the building. And so I swear I saw somebody sitting in the stands. But I also need to point out that in those days, my eyesight was like 2600. I was blind as a bat without my glasses. And whereas I slept on a cot in the basement, my glasses resided in my bedroom upstairs. Another petty form of control by my mother, but whatever. So I couldn't really see all that well to really know that there was somebody sitting there. So I kind of stood there and stared for a while, looking to see if there's any motion, and I didn't. So I convinced myself that there wasn't anybody there. But there was. And so the next night when I went back, I had gone inside and I was eating some food, and I was a little bit surprised when the lights went on in the back room and the door opened, and in walked Mr. Strupper, who was the president of the Portview Athletic Association. I quickly ducked into a closet, but he says, "Come on out, Jack, we know you're in there." I was like, oh, shit. Now, I need to point out that I was 18 at this point in time. I had turned 18 back in May. This is probably the beginning of June at this point, or July at this point. And so these were adult crimes that I was committing. This was a break-in and entering. This was robbery. They could have sent me to jail if they wanted to. And quite frankly, I wasn't really afraid of jail. I was too young and too stupid and too naive to even think about that as an issue. But I should have been afraid of jail. I was 5'5" and 105 pounds. I'd have been somebody's bitch. But the fact of the matter is, I was more afraid of what my mother would do to me. And probably she would have sent me to jail, but that was neither here nor there. I knew that I was in a predicament. I knew that. And I was crying. I was crying my little ass off. I was begging. I was pleading. I desperately needed them to know how desperate I was to get out of Portview, Pennsylvania, get off to the Navy, and get out of that hellhole. It worked. They heard me. They listened. And so they cut me a deal. They made me an offer. Bring my dad down the next day. Tell him what I had done. They would charge him the money that I effectively stole from them. And to my surprise, he did. He stood up for me. I don't think he ever told my mother. And they let me go. And so 2 weeks later, I headed off to boot camp. It's amazing what 3 square meals a day will do for a guy, especially if you don't have to steal to get it. Thank you.